Cool. So welcome all to another tools call. In case it's your first one, welcome. What we usually do is we follow the agenda doc that you can see on the chat. I will send it again because we have started recording now. And on to the start of the call itself. I think I'm going to remove this detail about us having moved the call up by 30 minutes. It's been a few months. Nobody said anything, so no need to keep that in there. Probably worth noting that before we do the next call, DST is going to change, at least in the UK, which is the time zone we follow. And on to the call itself, the pacing for the meeting, we do run it less often than we used to just because there's less content. I don't know if Rob wanted to say anything else about this.
I think this note was actually copied over from the previous agenda.
It's
so we can
quite likely.
I think we resolved this then. I actually left it because I wasn't sure if you wanted to discuss it again.
I think I'm happy with running it roughly every like 7-8 weeks for now. We can readjust if needed. If we keep having light calls, maybe we'll jump to 2 months. We'll see. Cool. The next one, it's just an FYI that we did propose to have a reminder that was earlier than 10 minutes before, just because some people might see the reminder and then be away from their keyboards, which can happen because the calls happen every many weeks. So now it's a 1-hour reminder, just FYI. We did discuss having 2 reminders, but that might be a bit noisy. So on to IDE/editor/tools. There's nothing on the agenda. Anybody want to add anything last minute?
I think Alan added some items related to tools in the what are people working on section, so we can discuss that then.
That's a good point. On to Command Go. I added a few items here. They're not mine per se, but I can talk about them. The first one is a user asking for structured version information. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about this for Go Please in the past. And I think goenv JSON is what they want. It's unclear to me if they want any more precision than this.
Yeah, it's not clear to me either. I'm going to let the proposal group push for more detail on that before making any particular judgments.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. At least thinking about where I've used Go version, the only thing I've had to do that's extra is for Devel versions extract the timestamp. But that's not a big pain point, at least for me. The next one is an issue that I saw Rob filed, and I've been bit by this in a separate project of mine as well. Even though the one I ran into is sort of my own fault because I made argument lists to the compiler longer, but it's still the same problem, which is that some Go commands are designed to take a lot of arguments, and some of them, like the compiler, do support response files, which is just a plain text file with a list of arguments, as opposed to laying them out in the command line. So I wanted to bring this up because we might, like Brian says, want to add support for this file format to Command Go itself. And the other side of this is we might want to expose this as a library, because otherwise I have to, for example, copy-paste the code into my tool.
Yeah, I think we probably will end up adding response files. We've been talking with Russ a little bit about exactly how to structure the flag format and the file format. Regarding libraries, so Go packages should probably just use this automatically when it needs it. I'm not sure that we have any other libraries in Xtools that specifically wrap Go command lines. I think it would be reasonable to create a library for that, but I'm not sure that it necessarily needs to live in Xtools.
I would hope that it's actually pretty easy to. Sorry, Rob, you got your hand. Why don't you go ahead? I would hope that it's actually pretty easy to sort of kind of join a bunch of strings and write into a file without needing a library to do that. If it's complicated, it suggests we haven't got the interface right.
Yeah, I was going to say that I suspect Go list is the only place where this is significantly a problem, and generally that should be wrapped with Go packages. Also, I don't really care what the solution is, but I do think that we should be able to pass arbitrarily long arguments to Go packages. It sounds like we might be able to do this without any changes in the Go command by breaking up queries into Go packages, but I'd rather not make assumptions about how the Go command operates. So I think this is it would be a good change.
This is only on Macs, right? That it's been a problem for us so far. I think
It was Windows.
it's Windows. Okay, right. Yeah, Linux at Google years ago had this problem, and somebody engineered the kernel so it would take 128 kilobyte arguments, which seems like it should be more than enough, but kind of Google has a way of bumping into all these kind of arbitrary limits much sooner than you think would be possible.
I mean, in particular, this limit, if you look at the log output from the test failure, it's a lot, but it's not that much.
Not that much.
Yeah. And I'm actually concerned that users are bumping up against this and we didn't realize.
Yeah, 128,000 data elements in a list is really a small number in this decade, but I guess choosing to pass that through the command line is sort of the mistake.
Something worth mentioning as well is that if you do go build X to see what's happening in a big project, a lot of the paths to files are absolute, even though the tools get run in the directory where the files are. So maybe a way to reduce this pain would be to use relative paths.
I would rather that people's programs not break if they accidentally expand dot into PWD when they pass something to the Go command. Like let's avoid making it fragile. Let's just find a robust solution, and then it will be robust for everyone.
Sure. I wasn't saying the opposite, to be clear. I'm just saying, I guess I'm saying maybe we shouldn't use response files as often as we currently do.
By the way, response files, these are the things that in GCC you can sort of say an @ symbol and then it just reads the words from that.
Same thing.
It's a strange, you think it would be a request file, surely.
Actually, when I first read about it, I was also confused because I thought it was like the result, like what it would print as a file, and I couldn't really understand. Cool. The next one is a CL that I sent some time ago about removing the I build flag. It's a cleanup because the flag has been deprecated for like 2 years or more now. So it's just a question of, it's not urgent, but is there something that should go into 120? I'm not sure what the budget in terms of review time is.
I don't think the review time is a problem. I will, I'll check in with Russ and see, because there's some complexity around when we can actually remove things that are deprecated. So
gotcha.
I will check in and see what we can do.
Okay. Happy to delay, FYI. I was just asking. The next one is just an FYI. It's a bit early to talk about it, I think. And it's also a long proposal, but it's essentially a target or toolchain version to add to Go mod files. So I would suggest that if anybody hasn't read it, go read it, and then maybe we can talk about it at the next meetup, at the next call. Anything else for Command Go that isn't covered here?
So as you may have seen, I have a pending CL out to tear out the script engine that we've been using for tests. And Russ took some interest in making that API simpler in order to make it even more reusable. So I know you and Roger have your own fork of the API, but there may be something kind of reusable and centralized in the Go project coming down the pipeline. The motivation for that was that I'm also ripping out. So right now, a lot of the Command Go tests depend on this vcstest.golang.org server. And that makes it really hard for people to run the Command Go tests when they're offline or in a network that has poor reachability to golang.org or whatnot. So I am shimming out all of the stuff in the tests that talks to the VCS test server and replacing it with an in-process server. And I'd like to eventually migrate to the point where we can flag off all of the non-hermetic dependencies and be able to run a non-trivial fraction of the tests with just local servers.
That makes sense. I think I'm not going to speak for Roger, but I'm pretty sure we're on the same page here. I would very much like to stop maintaining a soft fork of script_test.go, because in a way, whenever you improve anything, we have to copy and port it, and we've made changes and it's ugly. And also because we committed to V1, we've also carried some old design decisions like the APIs, and that's starting to hurt as well. So we've talked about a V2 for some time, and if you do this extraction, that would be a good time, I think, to break the public library or just make it obsolete entirely. Something that's worth mentioning is that we did some relatively major features like collecting coverage information for all the commands executed, Go commands executed. So that stuff is not something that stuff is something that we might want to talk about in terms of how could that fit into your extracted library.
As it just so happens, Than Macintosh this cycle is working on revamping the way that we do coverage in general. And there will be an environment variable where you can tell Go binaries essentially where to write their coverage information. And the cover tool will be able to merge the coverage information that goes there. So hopefully the amount of sort of custom logic to gather coverage from Go binaries that run as test subprocesses anywhere should be decreasing pretty dramatically. It should be sufficient to just preserve that environment variable. I will drop a link to that stack of CLs in the notes.
I will add a reminder to myself to talk to Roger and try to come up with a list of what features did we add on top of the initial fork, and then double check whether any of those are worth talking about in your extracted version. Like some of the things we did were pretty obvious, like make it not be tied to command Go, but some others were like, oh, this would be nice, and we just did it because why not? Cool. The next one is also a minor one. It's a relatively old CL at this point, and an even older issue, but it's about documenting what happens to import paths that don't have dots. And I would very much like to have this documentation merged because I keep seeing people do this.
I've just updated the reviewers for that, so we'll see if that can get it moving forward again.
Okay, cool. Anything else that's miscellaneous?
There is something miscellaneous happening with tooling for the Go issue tracker. Russ and Cherry are working on automating matching for test flakes in the Go project. And so you may be seeing some comments with some weird structure to them and some automated posts from GopherBot. The idea is to substantially reduce the amount of time that folks on the Go project have to spend classifying test failures from the dashboard. I don't think it will affect people who are not gardening the issue tracker, but I know there's some overlap with issue tracker gardeners and people who pay attention to the tools call.
Essentially, the comments are sort of code blocks in a GitHub issue that associate a sort of set of predicates, like must fail on these platforms and match these strings, and if so, then notify this particular issue with the information, so that this batch, which Russ runs every day or so, just automatically kind of attaches plate events to issues based on these sort of criteria that he's defined.
Is anything done about a flake that was seen some time ago but hasn't been seen since, or is that a manual process to double check that it's been fixed?
That kind of assumes that people are actively working on fixing the test failures that only occur rarely in the first place, which is not necessarily a valid assumption. I would say if there's a failure that represents something that's important to you, you should make sure that the issue for that failure has an assignee and that assignee knows why it's important to you.
Fair enough. So onto what are people working on? As an FYI, I worked years and years ago on a tool called BenchInit that would do something that was Josh's idea, which is to force the runtime to rerun the init function for a package over and over again. Because we were interested in some things like command go taking, I think it was something like 10 or 12 milliseconds to start up and basically do anything. And there wasn't a good way to benchmark that stuff other than to just execute the program and get some like general timing information. But since then, go debug init trace equals 1 became a thing. But that produces like a pretty raw data format. So I rewrote this tool to instead print benchmark output. So if anybody finds it useful, it is still kind of hacky though. And I was thinking earlier today that it uses a test binary, but then a test binary is probably not what you want because a real binary doesn't include test dependencies. So I might have to redo that, but.
I guess my turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have 3 fixes here. The first is a tiny fix to the scanner, which is just to make sure that the semicolons and comments that act as implicit semicolons appear in the right order. And I don't expect this to break anyone, but I just wanted to put it out there just in case anyone thinks they have tools that might be exquisitely sensitive to token order and position to have a look. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to make a stab at this sort of very old problem, which is that comments kind of move around when you do refactoring or modification of the Go AST tree. And so what I'm trying to do is come up with a design that lets us keep all of the comments stored in the tree, not in this sort of side table called file.comments, that will allow us to kind of pull off a subtree and replace a new subtree there and have the sort of token order be well defined. And the printer essentially use the tree for the basis of all the comments and tokens that it prints. And it might use position information for kind of prettifying, but it should be fundamentally based on the tree structure, not the side table. So I have a sketch of this. It's quite a big change. It changes AST. It adds a fair amount of memory usage. It updates the parser. It updates the. It has a test that makes sure it captures every single comment that you can possibly insert. And I'm currently working on updating the format from Pretty Printer so that it will use this information instead of sort of interleaving the side table of comments that it currently has today. And I'm sort of fairly optimistic that I can get all this to work. I'm still not certain this is on the right track. And there's been a number of questions. Rob raised one the other day, which is that I'm taking a very sort of token stream oriented approach, which is trying to make sure that the AST can record essentially faithfully all of the interleaved tokens and comments. And maybe what we should be doing instead is actually recording a much more kind of semantic structure sort of approach to comments, which is really trying hard to place them onto statements that they're logically associated with, even when they, from the parser's point of view, are not. So to give you an example, imagine you have a sequence of statements where you have S1 semicolon and then a line comment, S2 semicolon line comment. It's obvious to you and me that those line comments each belong to the corresponding statement on the same line, but to the parser and the AST, the line comment after the semicolon belongs to the beginning of S2 on the next line, which is sort of crazy, but that's what the parser sees. And so maybe the parser should in fact be trying to record the sort of semantic structure of comment association, which is really a totally different way of doing this. And I'm sort of starting to think that maybe that might be the right approach. So all of this is just to say, I'm starting to think about this problem. I have some sketches that are exploring one direction. If you have comments about this or you'd like to sort of play with what I have right now, feel free. The link is there. Please, Rob.
I'd also say that a lot of the decisions here will be motivated by the sort of pain points we're familiar with. So if you have a recent example where floating comments or just comments in general in the AST caused you trouble, it would be a good time to raise those points. Yes.
Yes, I'm very much aware of DST, and DST sort of is one sort of point in the space here. And I think DST is great for doing this kind of thing, but it seems really sad to me that you have to kind of use a whole nother package that's quite big to do this thing that should be sort of fundamental to the core sort of AST package. So if we can make DST obsolete, I don't mean any disrespect to DST here, and the maintainer of DST would be quite happy to retire, he told me. So I would like to just build it in as standard. So any comments about that before I go on to the third item?
I have one question related to what you said about memory usage, which is what is the plan with that? Because I think GoAST memory usage has always been a sticking point.
Yeah, so we, by the way, on the GoPlease team, are very conscious of memory usage, and the way that we plan to reduce our memory usage is by not keeping trees alive longer than absolutely necessary. So in that sense, this doesn't hurt us. We have a kind of higher level optimization in the works. The memory usage is sort of annoying because you imagine you add this feature today and you have a flag to switch it on dynamically. In other words, it would either record the comments in the tree or not record them in the tree. That switch doesn't actually add much cost. It costs about 1%. The cost is having the switch in the first place, which means having the place where you could record the comments that you almost never encounter. And those extra pointers in the AST nodes add about 17% memory usage even when you're not using them, and 18% when you are using them. So it's quite a lot, and that may be too much. I mean, if it's too much, then the alternative is that we have a side table that just maps nodes to comments that is conceptually part of the tree structure but stored outside of it. And I would prefer not to do that, because there's a lot of convenience to having the sort of the object graph of a given subtree be self-contained without needing to manipulate this sort of global side table or map, whatever it is. So my first preference would be to try and get it in the tree if we can afford it. But there's a sort of backup plan if that doesn't work. Daniel?
Another thought that comes to mind is right now we have the free floating comments. Could the switch be to not populate those free floating comments and only populate the tree-based comments? Maybe that's like a nice trade-off in terms of memory. So
free floating, I think you mean the ones that are sort of logically between two statements or declarations, but that get lumped together with the one that follows.
I mean file.comments.
So file.
Yeah.
Okay. So file.comments is the list of all comments, sort of ordered by position, and there are also kind of, you can think of it as a tree. The tree has a sort of partial index into those. In the case of doc comments, which are special, and in some cases, struct field comments. So I guess you could still preserve the, I guess, logical structure that it's a tree, except that the tree would be materialized as a map from nodes to their sort of child comments. Does that?
I think to Dan's point, I think dropping file.comments would not offset the cost of adding additional fields to the tree, because empirically we've observed that the tree is sparse, and so it's just.
I misunderstood the question. Sorry. Yes, that is correct. The actual comments themselves are not numerous, right? There's only 2% of nodes, or comments, and so it's not the comments themselves. It's the space that has to be reserved for the potential of a comment. That's what costs you the space.
I have one more question, and I promise it's going to be the last one. I noticed that some of the nodes don't have this new field, like a sign statement. Is there a reason?
You have this new field. That's right. So the observation is that if you analyze the whole grammar and you find every place where between a pair of tokens you could stick a comment, what you could do is then imagine taking your AST and just adding a new slice of comments between logically between every pair of tokens. But most of those are going to be empty, and so you want to sort of you want to reduce the number of places where you have to hold comments. So one of the ways you can do this is by fusing all of those sort of 2 or 3 extra slice fields into one slice field that has a kind of map key effectively inside each element. And the other thing you can do is to notice when is to push comments down into subtrees. So if you consider an expression like x plus y, if there's any comments in there, they're either before x, after x, before y, or after y. There's no other place that's sort of next to the plus that isn't logically also sort of next to one of the x or y. So if you have this invariant that you always push comments down to the subtree if possible, then the binary expression x plus y doesn't actually need to hold any other comments. They can always belong to the subtrees. Now, if you have a unary expression like minus x, there's actually a place which is before the minus sign that cannot sort of be pushed down into the subtree. So a unary expression has to have the potential to hold comments before the minus sign, but a binary expression doesn't need to hold comments of its own. And so if you follow that throughout, you're able to reduce the number of nodes that need this field by about 17% of all dynamically allocated nodes. I forget the fraction of types, but if you measure the actual dynamic impact, it's like 17% of allocations don't have one of these fields. So that's the reason we don't do it everywhere. Now, it may be that 17%, sorry, wrong number. 17% was the other figure, 26%. So it saves about a quarter of the memory by pushing these fields down into the subtrees. So that seems to be a pretty decent optimization, but it does mean that there's a sort of non-uniformity, which is that you don't, not every single node in the tree has this extra field, and maybe it's more convenient if they all do, even if it's more expensive. Any other questions about the AST? Okay, yeah, I'd love your review on this when it's in a slightly more polished form. And like I said, I'm still unsure this is the right approach, but we'll see what we get. So moving on, I'm also currently just taking the Go packages based driver, which is the thing that is common to multi-checker and single checker, aka GoVet. Sorry, no, that's not true. GoVet is based on unit checker. The thing that the code that implements multi-checker and single checker is a driver based on Go packages. In other words, it loads and type checks source code and then applies the checker to the whole bag of packages. And various people have told me that they would like to be able to sort of do something other than use that main function we provide. In other words, they want to sort of load the packages themselves, run the analysis, and post-process the results without just kind of calling this thing, which eventually calls exit. So basically, I'm just taking the kind of the parts that make up the single checker and multi-checker and exposing them as library functions so that you can kind of make an a la carte checker program by pulling these together yourself. So it's really sort of just moving code and creating a sort of public API for it. But I would love review on this if anyone has a minute. It's not quite ready yet, but maybe today it will be.
So you know how many people who write analyzers, they also provide a main package that just runs the analyzer. Would you expect those people to then start using this library?
I think that there's still I think use in providing an off-the-shelf kind of main function that allows you to just say main plus some analyzer or some set of analyzers and it works. So I don't expect that to change. But I think some people want to do some kind of I think some people would like the convenience of the analysis driver based on Go packages as a way of like doing some of the tedious parts of loading the code and so on and running a bunch of operations in parallel. And they just want to kind of write analyzer code, but just do something before and do something afterwards. And so they want to make a tool that sort of uses the analysis framework as a convenience internally, even though of course you don't need that. You could do it yourself. So I don't expect much will change for most people, but I think this may be a way that you can sort of use the convenience of the sort of existing analyzer machinery in a special purpose analysis program that you're building yourself. Rob, do you want to talk about Go, please?
Yeah, I thought it occurred to me as we were going through this meeting that I probably should have mentioned this in the IDE section. So as Alan alluded to earlier, our long-term goals for Go, please are to sort of redesign the core architecture such that we can drop AST and files from memory and reduce the overall overall memory usage, as well as support things like incremental analysis. But in the meantime, I wanted to point out that I'm working to reduce our current support burden for GoPlease as it exists today. And in doing so, I'm planning to deprecate several configuration settings that are marked as experimental, notably the experimental workspace module, the experimental did change debouncing. I think Dan, you might have asked for that, and I can talk about either of those in depth if you're interested. But point being that those never landed, and they affect the way that GoPlease executes. So by dropping support for them officially, we can significantly reduce complexity in the GoPlease code base. Additionally, evidence suggests that we have very few users on 113 through 115. And 116 has support for native overlays in the Go command, so it reduces significant complexity in Go packages. So we're planning on officially dropping support for those versions. That's compatible with the stated support window that we've always had, which is four versions. Yeah, so 116 isn't even supported anymore. This is true. However, it is still the latest, the newest Go version supported on certain cloud providers. And so we have been wary to drop support for 116, but it does seem like our user base has moved on. So we endeavor, phrased differently, we endeavor to meet our users where they are. But yeah, by dropping support for 113 through 15, which we don't think should cause any disruption, we can reduce complexity, and we plan to do that. And then on a related note, we're going to change our release model slightly. Currently, we're releasing approximately every month by merging from master. And I think we're going to switch to something more similar to the Go project, where we merge once a quarter, and then subsequent patch releases will just be cherry fixes. And the goals here are both to reduce the toil of releasing and increase the stability of subsequent patch versions, so that people can sort of rely on that. And so if the next GoPlease release will be 0.10.0, I think in that release, I will surface some warnings for the aforementioned deprecated features and versions. And then in 2 or 3 months, we will officially drop support for those things. So all this to say, if you have any concerns with what I just said, please let me know. Dan.
I'm guessing you've seen the other proposal about the toolchain version of Go in Go mod files, right?
I think I saw it go by. Can you remind everyone, including myself, of the details?
It's what I linked earlier in the command Go section. I'm highlighting it. Go forward compatibility discussion. But essentially, this could be a way out to get people to use newer Go versions and be stricter or more aggressive in dropping older Go versions, even though things like, oh, the cloud provider X doesn't support it is maybe a deal breaker. I don't know.
I mean, generally, it should be possible to use GoPlease built with the latest Go version to target support for older Go versions. But we rely on GoList to tell us about packages and Go root. And so the ambient, the Go version in path still needs sort of to be compatible with the target Go version used to build. And so it's possible that we could switch to a hybrid model where you have to build GoPlease with most recent Go, but we allow the Go command and path to be older, back to 116. But we haven't really figured all that out yet. Just actually restricting support to what we've said we support is a step in the right direction for us. It's significant reduction in complexity. If we're done with this discussion, the PUDS has just commented in chat, which I can read out. Maybe not right forum. Okay, well, we have time, so might as well be this forum. Took a quick pass on updating docs to reflect the existence of Go packages. maybe a quick pass over the Go types tutorial to better reflect Go packages existence. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, that tutorial also needs to be updated for generics. I wrote something external to it that discusses generics, but I have yet to integrate that with the tutorial. And yeah, highlighting, I guess we could have more examples of like end-to-end usage of Go types to build tools.
Yeah, so just part of the issue is you can sort of, when you're Googling things or, finding some random answer on Stack Overflow, a lot of times you get pointed to the old solutions and you can get pointed to Go build or, Go load or whatever. So maybe, Go build. I'm not I guess I just said this in the chat. I'm not 100% clear on its status. I thought it was going to be deprecated, but there was some discussion about it during, 1.11 timeframe maybe. And it was like, no, it can't be deprecated. But there's sort of old packages running around still. And, at least pointing to the newer way on any of those old packages, where I'm not even sure what that universe is of old packages. But then it's also like a couple of end-to-end examples, whether it's in the Go packages tutorial, or I'm sorry, the Go packages documentation, or some end-to-end examples in the Go types tutorial of, the modern way of doing things. Personally, what I end up doing is I go back to old code of mine and like copy paste, because I can't find sort of the canonical examples when I'm trying to do something fresh. I sort of go back to my personal own old code. But anyway, so I guess that's a topic. What is the sort of universe of sort of old packages that, in a Go path world people use but shouldn't be using anymore? There's Go loader, Go build. What else?
I raised my hand to bring up another one, which is Go importer, because between 2019 and 2020, I think there were like 4 or 5 different issues files saying Go types doesn't support modules, and it was essentially people trying to use Go types directly without Go packages, and they would try to use Go importer to load modules, and doing that manually is actually extremely complicated. So I think Go importer should also have a notice at the top saying, hey, if you just came across this, you probably don't want to use this package. You probably want to use Go packages. And the issue I linked to is one of the ways where I actually got stuck trying to use Go importer directly. So I couldn't figure it out, if anybody knows how to.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's lack of clarity about what's obsolete, and it is indeed extremely fiddly to try to use Go importer directly. And there's even one in the standard library called Source Importer, I think, which has never really worked.
Yeah, so pointers combined with some end-to-end examples would personally make me happier, and I think help other people when they're trying to do something, right? Because if you're not sort of an expert, some random gopher out there, you end up finding the old ways a lot of the time.
Does somebody want to volunteer to file an issue about this? Because otherwise we'll forget. I think action items don't really belong in the doc.
I can file an issue.
Oh, all right. I'll let you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Given that we had Hannah and Michael join pretty late, do either of you have any agenda items that you want to add at the last minute? Cool. That is a no. So the last item is just the next session. Given that by the time we do the next session, we're already going to be into the freeze, I don't think the timing matters too much. We probably want to do sometime late November before the holidays. So let's look at the calendar. How about November 16th or 23rd? Cool. I'll just tentatively say the 16th. and I'll just double check with Slack and the mailing list. And then who wants to be the volunteer? And I'm not going to allow Rob to volunteer himself again. And running the call, it's described in the wiki. It's essentially just setting up the agenda and reminding people to add the stuff to the agenda and adding the calendar event and so on. It's not that much time. Cool, I'll do it. I don't mind. So see you all in November.
Thanks, Dan.